Hi, everybody. Welcome to this video. Oh gosh, I'm excited about this video for many reasons. The subject, the topic, and somebody here, a colleague, a registered play therapist supervisor, someone who understands this topic is here with me to talk about it, which is awesome. And she's got a great background. It looks so full. I just want to go into that and jump around or roll around.
You're invited.
Amy Nelson is here with me. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege. Thank you.
I am so excited. We're going to talk probably about a lot of stuff, but we're definitely highlighting this book, Understanding Sensory Differences, a Neurodiversity Affirming Guidebook for Children and Teens. I was working on this probably the last few months, seems like quite a few months. And then Amy, you graciously contributed to the book, a writing. You and other play therapists, mental health professionals contributed, and including myself, just some of our personal stories of lived experience with sensory differences, sensory processing disorder, sensory needs, whatever terminology people use. I use sensory differences because I like that term, but I know it gets kind of labeled different things around the room sometimes. But we shared about some of our lived experiences, and you shared a great contribution. I was rereading it again before our video, and I remember what struck me the very first time I read it, because it struck me again, that I think is so great for the reader when they pick this up and read your story, is it really highlights the progression of awareness, right? Of I don't know what's going on, and I'm getting mislabeled, to understanding yourself, and then that turning into empowerment. It really represents that journey your story does.
Yes.
Did you
Yeah.
think about that as you were writing your contribution? Obviously, you lived it.
I really didn't. I am a very linear thinker. And so
Uh,
for me, it was once upon a time, I was born and I hated pantyhose,
right.
and then I was introduced to sensory processing and now I love myself, it was just my experience. And as you said, as I became more aware and my caregivers, really, that was insightful too, as my mother and my father became more aware. And this wasn't until adulthood. It's been a game changer.
Yeah.
And not just personally, but professionally in what I do in play therapy, in my work in schools. So yeah, that's how it's reflected.
Yeah, it really is something I think is relatable. I think a lot of people would read your contribution and feel like I can relate to this. And I think that that's what a lot of kids go through even today, even with our level of knowledge today. There's still so much misunderstanding about sensory needs in our sensory system, and there's so many kids that still it's missed, they get mislabeled, and I think they have experiences like you did growing up. And I think that people can read this and maybe it will help them realize, oh, wait a minute, maybe I need to take a better look here instead of just labeling this child as this problem child in some way.
Yes,
I'm
it's
sure you run into that a lot.
uh, I work in school-based settings, and
Okay.
so and I think that was reflected in my story. It was reflected in your story,
Mhm.
and going over your story, I remember thinking, what would happen if your parents sent you to a therapist? Would they have seen you as oppositional? He's lying
Mhm.
about not wanting to go to school. He's faking like he's sick. He's withdrawing. Maybe he's depressed. And if that's our only lens, right, we're missing some of that. And you put this sensory lens on it and have a better understanding of what your needs are and can express those needs in a way that others can kind of accommodate you. You know how to make those advocacy moves for yourself. Yes. So I see that echoed. So as you said, even all of this information at our fingertips, it's still so misunderstood. And
Yeah.
that's why what you're doing is so important in the play therapy community, because they're sending those kids to us for therapy.
Yeah.
And if we only have one perspective, one way to see it, the medical model or even through a mental health model, then we might be missing something.
Yeah. That's so true. I was just in a conversation recently about this idea because obviously the guidebook talks a lot about and focuses on sensory differences and from an affirming place, but we're really talking about neurodivergence, and we're just kind of honing in on the sensory neurominority, but the bigger picture, right? Because a lot of kids come in who are autistic and have sensory differences, or ADHDers and have sensory differences. And just for play therapists, ideally to be leading out in normalizing neurodivergence
Yes.
instead of being on the catch up end of things, right? But for us to really get this, we get child affirming
Right.
in general,
Right.
but let's take it a step further and be neurodiversity affirming. I was just talking about this. And I think you're so right about that. People come to see us, and parents especially, even other professionals who refer, they send kids to us because they think, okay, you're the quote unquote expert who can help this child with whatever.
Right.
And for us to be able to educate, hey, let me tell you about this. Let
Yes.
me tell you what's going on here with sensory issues. Have you heard about this? And a lot of people haven't. That's so powerful. That's so powerful. That just piece of education can be such a powerful help for the child.
Yes. Yeah. And most of my work is in school-based settings, which I think I like wrote a quote that you said in your book, uh, just about school-based systems being such a culprit
Yeah.
for really kind of those deviations, right?
Yeah.
And maybe just missing those needs. And they've got one idea and one way to be, right? And if you don't
Yes.
fit in that system, then you're an outlier. And then what happens is your needs get overlooked and then exacerbated, because we are all people in our environments, right? And so part of my efforts is training caregivers, training the educators. And when they have those ahas in their minds, they say, oh, I get that in myself. I can see that reflected in how I respond when the classroom is too noisy, or when the kids are running around me too fast. When they see that, then they can have better empathy for the child,
Yes.
and they're more likely to make those accommodations. So this book is giving caregivers, empowering caregivers to have a place to start,
Yeah.
right? With really confusing world and terminology, and even some disagreements in that terminology, but giving them a place to start, a place
Yes.
to understand it, so that they can get a better conception of what their child is potentially going through.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, I remember writing that story in the book, that personal experience I had as an adult advocating for a child in an IEP meeting. And I mean, it just will always be burned into my brain, the dismissiveness of this school staff that was so blatant and, obviously, probably pretty ableist as well. And then, leaving there, like I leave there and I'm adult, and I've got a decent sense of myself at this point.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go about my business, but this child's going back into that school environment the next day. It's the kids who then have to continue to suffer, from adults just being in whatever place they're in, where there's this either, on the positive, just a lack of awareness. And once they get the awareness, they're happy to be aware,
No
or
litter.
negative, they don't want to know
Yeah.
and they're not going to know, and they're going to keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that you do a lot in the school setting. And like, I remember that now that you mentioned it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, like that is so cool because so much happens in the school setting.
Yeah.
So I wasn't even going to ask you this. So if I'm putting you on the spot, you could go, time out, let's talk about something else.
Okay.
But what that must be like to navigate the school system with not just teachers, but principals and all these different stakeholders, and trying to help them understand sensory differences, neurodivergence. Give us a snapshot of like what that is like, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess.
Oh man, it is the reason why I drink.
Yeah.
It's not the only reason. Let's just say that. It's I don't want to say it's a love-hate relationship, because it truly, I've stepped out of the school sector before and I jumped right back in. Because at the end of the day, just like as adults, we spend so much of our lifetime around our work.
Yeah.
That's echoed in children in school. And I remember when I was in private practice, so many children referred to me from school systems because they didn't fit, right? They were out of sync, they were out of place, mislabeled, misdiagnosed, and parents were desperate. My kid can't be kicked out of school. What do I do, right? And really, Dr. Dunn helped me understand, and I really take an ecosystems approach, working in the system. So it's multi-tiered, right? Mm-hmm. It's multi-tiered, but like therapy in general, it's all relational. Yeah. And that means it's not a fast process. I wish research alone was enough to just make people say, okay, right? But it's not, it's relational. But I can work through an MTSS model, like multi-tiered systems of support. And so at the first layer, I start by educating the teachers, right? And really provide those aha moments, the background of sensory processing, help them reflect on what that's like for them. And then that really helps connect them. And then I do sensory play groups. And so the benefit of working in a school-based setting is that I'm not hindered by restrictions in children that I can see. I'm part of the environment, right? I'm part of the system. So I can support all children. And that's a benefit, because sometimes kids are overlooked. Quiet, compliant kids can be overlooked, and they still have those needs. And I see this in your story. I saw it in the other lived experiences you had in your book. But we just didn't know, right? Yeah. We just didn't have a lens. Our caregivers didn't have a lens. They didn't have the words. And so I work with 3 and 4-year-olds, and that's just emerging. And neurodivergent, so a lot of times they don't even have expressive language, but helping them through play-based groups understand their own sensory preferences, their needs, in vivo, in real time, coaching them, highlighting that for the teacher, for the peers, so that really promote inclusion and affirming practices in the school setting. And then what happens is, if I get to step away and I've made that adult different, then I've supported 52 kids there. Yeah. And I can go to the next adult and there's another 52 kids. So my scope expands that way. But it's a labor of love. Yes. It's really frustrating when there's a very different perspective about children and their behavior.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine that. But also how important you being in your position is, like you just said. There's not a week that goes by in my private practice that I'm not in a school discussion. Yeah. And, especially with my neurodivergent clients, because it's just an environment that they're in a lot. And oftentimes it can be sort of anti, not on purpose, but just anti by design, neurodivergent. And so always school discussions every week. I'm sure there's not been a week that has gone by. And of course, being in a private practice setting, I can contact a teacher, I can contact a principal, but it's not the same. And sometimes that doesn't go anywhere. Being able to be in there like you are, and like you said, I'm part of the system. So I can come in here, I can talk to this person, I can work with that child, I can navigate the environment. You're literally in the environment where it might be going down. Yeah. And to be able to try to educate and influence and provide advocacy is huge. Yeah.
And the supports are, and what I loved about your book is you talked about pragmatic supports. And I sometimes refer to them as applied sensory strategies, but it's always a 2-prong approach. It's the support of the child and the dyad, but it's also the environment, right? Yeah. Because if I'm working on all these skills and then I send you out to an environment that is not responsive, or to caregivers that aren't able to advocate for you, especially at 3 and 4, when they're not able to fully articulate their needs. Yes. And the change, the supports don't stick around. And so really advocating for applied strategies they can use in their classroom at any given moment. I mean, we all use strategies, right? Yes. To support our nervous system and staying regulated, and just normalizing that. And then helping to shape that system. It's labor of love, as I said.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I want to point out something else from your story that you shared in the book that I thought was so neat. And again, so important. And that was a couple different places where you ran across an adult in your life who was affirming to you. Maybe they didn't understand the neurodiversity paradigm or that, but just in a way they treated you and responded to you, they were affirming. And you did such a good job of highlighting what a difference that made for you.
Yeah. When you're seen, when you can be seen and you can be yourself and unmasked and make mistakes and still be loved,
Yeah.
and maybe even sometimes be admired, I those teachers, oh, that's just Amy, right? Oh, Amy,
Yeah.
right? Even if they're exacerbated with my seeking behaviors, right? It's just Amy. And that made the difference, because I wasn't made aware of sensory processing until after graduate school.
Yeah.
Right. You
Right.
were right in there too, right?
Right. That's right.
It's like, wow, this is why I'm starting at 4-year-olds, right?
Yes.
Let's start here. Why are we, working so hard and so long, going through these painful experiences? And really, the painful experiences are not so much how our senses play out in a world, but either the world not being designed for us,
Mm-hmm.
or people dismissing our needs in general, and being
Yes.
unwilling to meet those needs and make those accommodations.
Yes. Yeah, you and I both share that common feature of not only being figuring it out and becoming aware of this is what's really going on with me, and this is how my system works as an adult, but then how that, was very empowering. I've talked about this sometimes when I do sensory trainings. I don't know if I mentioned it in the book, but yes, there are tips and tricks and interventions and things like this that can be very helpful, but they wouldn't have mattered if I did not have that awareness and that empowerment.
Right.
That had to come first.
Yeah.
And then it's easy almost to be like, okay, I can learn this tip or this trick and it just feels good and it's something I'm choosing to do and it helps me and I get it.
Yeah.
But I think you're so right. That relationship that leads to awareness and empowerment, we can provide that for the kids that we see. Wow. When they're kids, not when they're college grads.
Right. Right. And maybe have a slew of diagnosis attached to, what is a divergency. And,
Yeah.
diversity is everywhere and should be celebrated and appreciated and respected, and in a lot of cases admired. And
Yeah.
that's why I push so hard on inclusion practices in my school-based settings. And if you can only meet your needs with a special person in a special room with special equipment, that's like trying to potty train a child 45 minutes once a week.
Right.
It's just not going to work out, right?
Right.
And so giving them the power to meet those needs and giving those educators a place to say yes.
Yes.
Right. And it starts with all awareness. You're right. Right. Tip top awareness right there.
Yes. Well, I know that you do trainings as well.
Right.
And there are a few other people out there I know of in the play therapy world who do trainings on sensory needs and have written about it as well. And of course, that's kind of what the book is for. It's for professionals and parents to pick up and be like, oh, let me learn more about this. Let me learn how to support kids who have these differences or these neurotypes. But what would be something, so that's kind of what the book is for. So we want people to pick up the book who need to learn more and want to learn more, but it doesn't have to be from the book at all. What's like a nugget of information you would want the professional or parent to know that really they don't know much about this? They're needing to learn and wanting to learn.
I would say that we all have sensory preferences and needs, every single one of us. Neurodivergent children, adults, ours may look a little different, maybe a little more significant, right? It may impact our daily living a little differently, but we all have sensory needs, and we can use our sensory preferences to change how we feel and to regulate our nervous system. And so it is something we do so effortlessly all day long. It's just making the unconscious conscious.
Yes, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. It's actually kind of a good final note because it was just very well said. Yeah. Well, I mean, we could talk about a lot more. Trust me. We could, but I know it's a YouTube clip, and I know good YouTube clips don't run on and on for an hour.
Right.
So we're going to try to wrap it up. But I hope you guys, if you're watching this and it's a subject that you're not very familiar with or you're brand new to it, definitely consider, picking up the guidebook. You can get it online very easily. There's a lot of information in it about sensory differences and being affirming and what that means. And then there's a lot of worksheets that you can use to help kids understand what sensory differences are from a strengths-based perspective and an empowering perspective, which I know Amy and I are both big believers in how important that is when you're working with kids, especially neurodivergent kids. And then seek out some of these trainings that Amy might be doing or I'm doing, and go attend and learn more. Please especially do this if you're a play therapist watching, because we want our play therapy community to be on the forefront of being affirming and knowing how to do this through our play therapy theories and approaches. So, Amy, thank you for chatting with me. Thank you for writing in the book.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me. You are doing a service to the play therapy community and for neurodivergent children everywhere, and bringing that awareness with the energy, effort, and all that you've done in this community. So thank you for just making it out loud.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. And thank you guys for watching. And, please give us a like and come back and subscribe to the AutPlay Therapy YouTube channel and watch more videos. And maybe Amy will come back and talk about something else sometime.
I can show off my fidget collection.
Yes, we could share our favorite sensory fidget toys. That'd be a cool video, right?
Yeah, my tactile tools. Yeah.
Yes, we'll have to do that. All right. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.